So if you notice in the parental generation, when he has selected a pure breed of tall plant and a pure breed of dwarf plant, so when he is done the crossbreeding, he noticed the genotype which has been observed here. All are capital T and small t only. And the phenotype which he noticed is all the pea plants are what plants they have been getting in F1 generation? Everybody. All the
Tall plants.
tall plants only. So he has noticed that the dwarfness is not shown up. Dwarfness is hidden. Dwarfness did not show up in the progeny of what? F1 generation. So F1 generation, there is no dwarfness has been shown. That is what he has noticed when he is crossing the parental generation. So that is why he has selected again across the tall pea plants of the F1 generation. So now, as we know, all the plants in F1 generation, what is all the plants in F1 generation? Capital T, small t, capital T, small t, capital T, small t, and capital T, small t. So he selected any two of it, your choice, either first two or last two or middle two. So everywhere the genotype is same. So he selected the two tall plants from the where guys? From the F1 generation. So now he has been going to cross this F1 generation and he observed the results. So he found that when he has selected the two plants from the F1 generation, two tall plants, both the plants are what guys? Both are tall plants only. So he noticed that in F2 generation, he observed another shocking thing. Again, he is obtaining dwarf plant is reappearing in the F2 generation. So the F1 generation, which is hidden, which is not shown up in the progeny, which is reappearing in the F2 generation. So that is what he observed. So let us see how much it is. So he has taken a two tall plants, which is having tall plants having a tall into tall. Both are what generation? Pure breed or it is F1 generation? Everyone, they are the F1 generation. So tall into tall. So capital T, small t into capital T, small t. So when he has done this crossing, okay, so our cross breeding, so he has been noticed that all the plants which are produced is not same again. So he has noticed three tall plants are producing and one dwarf plant is producing. So that is what the characteristic trait which is disappear in the F1 generation, which is did not turn up, which is did not shown up, is again reappearing in the F1 crossing. So he has noticed that how many tall plants is producing? Three tall plants, capital T, capital T, capital T, small t, capital T, small t, and last one is small t, small t. So this is how the another shocking results which has been observed by Mr. Mendel. So he has been noticed that in the F2 generation, the 3/4 of the plants is 3/4, 3 by 4th of the plants are what plants guys? Tall plants, and 1/4 well, what is coming guys? 1/4 is coming what?
Dwarf plant.
One
Dwarf plant.
is dwarf plants. So that is what he has been noticed that. And the dwarf rate of the parent pea plant, which is basically disappeared in the F1 generation. If you notice it, F1 generation, all the plants which is obtained is tall. So which is disappeared in the F1 generation progeny, again reappeared in the second generation. So that is what Mendel said there. So Mendel's concluded that the trait of dwarfness of one of the parent pea plant had not been lost. It was like we can say hidden or concealed in the F1 generation, and it is re-emerged in the F2 generation or the second generation. So that is what the Mr. Mendel has concluded that the dwarfness as it is disappear or concealed in the F1 generation and it is reappeared in the F2 generation. That is why he has called that this dwarfness is called as recessive gene or dominant gene. Everybody, it is
Recessive gene.
recessive gene, or we will say it is called as recessive trait. He is to known as recessive trait. And the tallness is appearing. You can take the trait of tallness. So it is always, it is not concealed. Concealed means not been lost in any generation. So that is why it is always dominating. Even F1 generation entirely dominated. So that is why it is called as, what gene we used to call as? A tallness. Tallness is called as a dominant trait, we used to say, and dwarfness, what we used to say?
Recessive trait.
Dwarfness is called as recessive trait. So that is what Mr. Mendel has concluded regarding a pea plants. Shown of the traits may be a dominant traits or maybe a recessive trait, but this is the same thing is applicable for entire animals also. So these pea plants which he noticed in his F1 parental generation to F1 generation, now from F1 generations to which generation? F1 generation to F2 generation. So everywhere, Mr. Mendel has noticed that all the hybrid tall parents of F1 generation were either tall or dwarf. If you notice it, F1 generation all are tall plants. F2 generation 3 tall plants and 1 dwarf plants. So you notice no intermediate plants. That is what the main thing. So the no plants with the intermediate height. So that is the major observation has been done by Mr. Mendel when he has been crossing the tall plant and as well as dwarf plant. So that is why. So Mendel's experiment shows that the traits like tallness or dwarfness, whatever it is, they are inherited independently. So it is not depend on each other independently. So that is what we can say law of segregation also. We will study that independently. So it is not depends on each other. One time the tall plants is coming, another time a tall plants along with that, the which is concealed in the F1 generation is reappearing or re-emerge in the F2 generation. So that is why there is no kind of intermediate plants is appears in both the generations. So because of this, we will say tallness or dwarfness had mixed up, then only the intermediate plants will come. So if there is no intermediate plants are coming, means in the sense of they are inheriting independently or depending on each other. Everybody, they are inheriting independently. If they are depending on each other, definitely a medium plant should come. That is what it is not at all reappearing. No medium plants is forming. So the tallness and dwarfness is not mixed each other. So they're not blended to produce the medium height plants. So that is why they are, we can say that they are independent traits. They are inherited independently. Is it okay here, Kevin? Vaitrayan? Why they are independent?
Yes,
Because we are not noticing any kind of medium or intermediate height plants. So they are not blended each other. They are not mixed up each other. So that is what the conclusion you have to make. So he has conducted this experiment around 1064 pea plants of F2 generation. So out of 1064 F2 generation pea plants, he has noticed that around 787 he has noticed all tall pea plants, and he has noticed that around 227 they are coming what guys? Dwarf pea plants. So no intermediate plant. So that is why we will say the ratio of, if you have taken ratio of tall plants to dwarf plants, if you have noticed, it is 787 is to 277, which is, if you have done approximately, which is equals to 2.84 is to 1. So that is what it is, which is approximately equals to what? 2.84 means we'll consider as a what? It is 3 and 1. So that is how Mr. Mendel has been observed when he is crossing monohybrid inheritance. He noticed in F1 crossing, all the F2 generations, which has been taken the total ratio of 1064, in that around 787 are tall plants, 277 is short plants or dwarf plants. He divided with the 277. Nothing has been done. So approximately you get 2.84 this one and 1. So which is equals to 3 is to 1. So this is the major result in this ratio of tall plants to the dwarf plants in the F2 generation. F1 generation, what is the ratio? Anybody can tell? F1 generation, no ratio because all the plants are what? F1 generation, all the plants are tall plants only, so that no dwarf plant is appears, so that no ratio. So if they're asking F1 generation ratio means F2 plants, that is what F2 generation, we're getting 3/4 is tall plants, 1/4 is dwarf plants, means the ratio is how much guys? F2 generation ratio. F2 generation is how much? All of you. F2 generation is how much guys? It is 3 is to 1. So that is what you have to remember. So as we know, a 3 is actually indicating a dominant trait. That is, what is that guys? Tallness. So, and 1 is dwarfness, which is indicating a recessive trait. So that is what you have to remember. And this ratio is only called as monohybrid ratio. Please all of you remember. F1 generation ratio, or we will say, sorry, this is a single trait or monohybrid inheritance. That ratio is called as monohybrid ratio. 3 is to 1. So a generation occurs in the ratio of 3 dominant to 1 recessive. This is what he has observed in his garden after crossing a single characteristic trait, that is what? Tallness and dwarfness. So F1 crossing, parental crossing, and F1 crossing. Hope everybody understand this one. Now, what is law of segregation, and as well as how he explained his results, this 3 is to 1, and as well as F1 generation. These are all the things we will study in the next class. Now, just for 1 minute, you just observe this, why he chosen this pea plants, and as well as what is this F1 crossing and parental crossing, so that you will get a view of this one. Just observe this video of 1 minute just so that you can understand more little clearly.
Scientist to make a systematic study of patterns of inheritance which involved the transfer of a pea plant. Gregor Mendel was the first scientist to make a systematic study of patterns of inheritance which involved the transfer of characteristics from parents to progeny. He did this by using different varieties of pea plants, Pisum sativum, which he grew in his garden. Some of the characteristics or traits of the pea plants, whose transmission to progeny was investigated by Mendel, were height of pea plant or length of stem of pea plant, tall or dwarf shape of seeds, round or wrinkled, and color of seeds, yellow or green. Yet another contrasting characteristics or traits investigated were colors of flowers, white or violet. Mendel chose pea plants for studying inheritance because pea plants had a number of clear-cut differences which were easy to tell apart. For example, some pea plants were tall, having long stem, whereas others were dwarf, having short stem. Some pea plants produced round yellow seeds, whereas others produced wrinkled green seeds, etc. Another reason for choosing pea plants was that they were self-pollinating, which enabled them to produce next generation of plants easily. And finally, Mendel chose pea plants to study inheritance and not animals, including human beings, because many generations of pea plants can be produced in a comparatively short time span, and their study is much simpler than that of animals. A new form of plant resulting from a cross or breeding of different varieties of a plant is known as a hybrid. When we breed two pea plants having one contrasting characteristic each, or one trait each, to obtain new plants, then it is called a monohybrid cross. In monohybrid cross, we will study the inheritance of one pair of contrasting characteristics, tallness and dwarfness of the pea plants, by their first generation and second generation progeny. On the other hand, if we breed two pea plants having two contrasting characteristics each, or two traits each, to obtain new plants, then it is called a dihybrid cross. In the dihybrid cross, we will study the inheritance of two pairs of contrasting characteristics of pea plants, such as round yellow seeds and wrinkled green seeds. The inheritance of a single pair of contrasting characteristics among the pea plants, like tall stem and short stem. Mendel crossbred the purebred pea plants, differing in these traits, and noted their occurrence in the progeny of succeeding generations. Mendel first crossed purebred tall pea plants with purebred dwarf pea plants and found that only tall pea plants were produced in the first generation or F1 generation. No dwarf pea plants or short pea plants were obtained in the first generation of progeny. From this, Mendel concluded that the first generation or F1 cross showed the traits of only one of the parent plants, tallness. The trait of another parent plant, dwarfness, did not show up in the progeny of first generation. Mendel then crossed the tall pea plants of the first generation, F1 generation, and found that tall plants and dwarf plants were obtained in the second generation or F2 generation in the ratio of 3:1. In other words, in the F2 generation, 3/4 plants were tall and 1/4 were dwarf. Mendel noted that the dwarf trait of the parent pea plant, which had seemingly disappeared in the first generation progeny, reappeared in the second generation. Mendel said that
This one you note it down. This is what F1 generation, tallness is appeared, dwarfness is disappeared. That is what concealed means it is gone. But it is same thing again is appearing in the F2 generation. So that is what we can say. There is no intermediate plants of forming because they are not combining each other. They are not blended each other. So they are independently inheriting in the progenies.
The trait of dwarfness of one of the parent pea plant had not been lost. It was merely concealed or suppressed in the first generation to re-emerge in the second generation. Mendel called the repressed trait of dwarfness as recessive trait and the expressed trait of tallness as the dominant trait. In this way, Mendel's experiments with tall and dwarf pea plants showed that the traits may be dominant or recessive. Out of a total 1,000.
Okay, so that is what it is. So you can notice what is the ratio of monohybrid ratio, everybody?
3:1.
Ratio you notice? Monohybrid ratio is 3:1. So till here you study, then what is law of inheritance? This is what Mendel's first law of inheritance. Also we can say law of segregation. And what is the results of monohybrid inheritance? That is all we'll discuss in the next class. So with this I'll leave you. Thank you everyone. Make proper revision and do your exam well. Thank you all.